So it's again a pleasure to be here. We're going to talk about the Red Eagles. I read the write-ups, and it sounded like our job was to go beat up on people, and that's probably a little further from the truth than it was. We ran a program where we flew MiGs, and our job was to expose the MiGs to our fighter pilots and show them the shortcomings. And by the end of the week, our goal was they were killing us. We weren't killing them. And so that kind of was the mission. The security of the program was top secret, special access, which meant you had to sign your name in. You didn't get in-briefed on it because you had a clearance. You had to have a need to know. And so you were in-briefed, you were out-briefed on the program. We lived at Tonopah, and we'll talk about that in a minute. We lived uprange. We hid from satellites. Every day we got a report from Cheyenne Mountain that would tell us when there were overheads that we had to hide from, when their satellites were up there. I'm not sure how well we did it. You know, you had to subtract 8 or 6 hours from Zulu, and I'm not sure over 10 years we'd ever goose that up. And the MiGs were on the ramp, because it certainly wasn't a good secret to the Russians. They knew exactly what we were doing. But we went to Tonopah, is where we went, and security really got complicated in that the 117s, the stealth fighters, arrived up there at Tonopah. And in fact, that's probably the best kept secret we've ever had. I mean, when they arrived, they turned the whole place into a base, and I mean, you had to scan your palms to get in. Well, you couldn't even get there. I mean, to get on airplanes to go there, you had to do it. We had our own airplanes to take us up there. The security was really tight up there when the 117s were there. We flew at night, or we flew at days, I'm sorry, they flew at night. And actually, we were about 45 miles, and we'll talk about the location. But security was tight. But in the end, it turned out the Soviets knew that we had the MiGs up there the whole time. And actually, the smart people said we were just there to cover up the 117s. We were kind of covered for their program. Can you play that tape? Okay, you know, we come out of Vietnam, the Air Force, and we weren't much different than the Army and the Navy. We weren't real happy with what went on in Vietnam. Thousands of reasons why we didn't. You know, in Korea, we shot down 10 airplanes for every one they shot down of ours in an air-to-air fight, you know, in a dogfight. And the one was pretty good. In Vietnam, depending on how you measure it, whatever, it was either 3-to-1 or 1-to-1. You know, and there was 1,000 reasons why we didn't do good there. First off, we were going to fight a nuclear war, and so we took all our fighters and said, you're going to carry nukes, and you don't need a gun. You're just going to carry nukes, and there's no sense practicing air-to-air, because every time we did, we lost airplanes, you know, out of control. So we cut down on air-to-air training, and so we got airplanes that aren't ready to go to air-to-air. We don't have tactics, and we went into Vietnam. And there were a lot of other restrictions. You know, we didn't have guns. We didn't have guns on the F-4. The missiles didn't work. You know, if you look at it, 1 out of 10 radar missiles worked, and 1 out of 5 heat missiles worked. I mean, come on, that was pretty. Now, and some of that in defense of the people that maybe here that worked on the missiles, they were shot out of parameters. They were shot because there was no training. You know, I got over there in '73, end of '73, January '74, and the war just ended. You know, my training in fighters, I had 5 air-to-air rides, and the whole rides were my job was to hang on the wing that blew 3, or I was blew 4, he was 3. I just hang there, you know. I mean, so it was horrible. So the training wasn't good. So we weren't happy with the way the results were. And we have a fighter weapons school. It's like Top Gun, the same thing. Our fighter weapons school was a little older than Top Gun, but same thing. Well, now we're talking about the '70s. We had some guys there, and they went on to be pretty good guys. One was Johnny Jumper. He was a captain there. He was an instructor. He went on to be the chief of staff of the Air Force. Ron Keyes was an instructor there, captain. He went on to be run ACC as a 4-star. And the other one was Dickie Myers. Dickie Myers went on to be the chairman. So they were the instructors there in the early '70s. And they said, we have enough. We're going to change the way the Air Force is going. And originally they started the aggressors. You know, we're going to have guys flying planes that look like Soviet airplanes, and they're going to teach us how to fight there. And then we started red flag. The whole idea of red flag was, you know, the records show if you survive 3 or 4 missions in combat, your chances of making it are a lot better. And they started red flag. And then they decided they were going to start constant pay. And we were going to fly against the real mates. And that's what we did. So we had some pretty good guys there that got the change going in the Air Force. So Project Constant Peg, can you bring the slides up for me? It was interesting in that we needed a location, and they put us at Tonopah. Tonopah is an interesting place. Please slide. So we went to Tonopah, which is uprange. And everybody says, well, we were about 40 miles from Area 51. We were northwest of there, and we were about 40 miles from the town of Tonopah. And that's where they decided to put us. You just want to do the slides for me? Okay, slide, please. So we started there. You can see that's the beginning of Tonopah when MiGs arrived. It was a 3,000-foot runway run by Sandia. We put 9,000 feet of concrete in, and we deployed up there to put the MiGs there. Slide, please. I always show this slide to my daughter who has horses. There's wild horses everywhere up on the Nevada range. And that was kind of construction. I mean, every day you'd see horses. Slide, please. And that's kind of the way the MiG squadron ended up. We were there, and we were going to do things, but then all of a sudden something changed. The 117s arrived, the stealth fighters. They put them in there. The stealth fighters was a whole different ballgame. Okay, they created a base there. We lived there. They had housing for about 800 people. It was located at 8 miles from the base north, and we had Olympic swimming pool. We had bowling alleys. We had ball fields. Every Wednesday was always steak and lobster you could eat. I mean, the Reagan money was very good for the stealth fighting, but they took it over. I mean, the security was incredible still. You know, guys would go to work from Nellis. You go to Nellis, they had an airline. It was called Key Airlines. They would fly out of Nellis and fly everybody to work. Well, most of the people would spend a week up there. They'd go up on Monday and spend a week up there. But some would still commute, but it was an incredibly well-kept secret. You couldn't get near the base. You could, if you wanted to, leave Tonopah and drive to Man Cap, which is where we lived, which was 8 miles north of the base, and you couldn't go beyond that. You know, that's as close as you could get, and the security was incredible up there. It fell apart when we started losing 117s. Remember, we lost 117 in California? We had one crash in California. It's the first one we lost, and we went up there and put A7 parts all over the hillside so they think it was an A7. And we thought it was covered, but then they went to Washington, D.C., and Washington, D.C. doesn't lie, and they said, you know, was it an A7? No comment. No, we'd said no. Was there an F-4? No. Was there a stealth fighter? No comment. Well, come on. So security kind of went downhill after that, but it was still a pretty secure base for it, you know. And I tell a funny story. Maybe some people won't find it funny. But when we were at Tonopah, we had a base commander, and I won't say his name, and he drank a lot. You know, he'd fall down a lot. And we were up there on a Friday, and he says, my God, there's people at the gate 8 miles north, newsmen, and they want to know what's going on. You know, and I had a wise ops officer who wasn't very kind. He says, what am I going to tell them? He says, tell them it's a dry out facility for senior officers. Well, anyway, so security didn't go real good there, but it was a funny story. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the people we had there, and I'm going to talk my unit, not 4450 stealth fighters. We had 200 enlisted guys, had 17 pilots, and had about 10 other officers that were Intel and GCI kind of guys. The heroes of the whole program were the maintenance guys. They were the heroes. You know, when a guy comes in the Air Force to work on airplanes, he wants to work on airplanes. And unfortunately, after about 6-7 years, we make him go work at the desk, where he's a dispatcher. Something else is no longer a crew chief. These guys want to crew airplanes. So all our crew chiefs were tech sergeants or master sergeants. They could do anything. They could do anything. I mean, they worked on airplanes. We flew, 17,000 hours. We never lost an airplane due to maintenance. Never. And so they were the heroes, and they were great. They'd go to work on Monday. Monday at noon, they'd catch a plane up there, and they'd come back Friday evening when we were done flying. And they truly were the heroes of the program. I had a chief master sergeant, Hardy. I'd walk down on the ramp and say, is the plane flyable? And he'd go, yeah, I guess. I mean, we had no higher ups or anything to help us to do it. The pilots were a different corps. You had to be from Top Gun, Navy. I had 17 pilots, 3 were Navy, 1 was a Marine, and the rest were Air Force. You had to be Top Gun, or you had to be the tactics school at Yuma for the Marine. And the Air Force guys had to be fighter weapons school guys, instructors, or aggressors. And so that was our story. So the pilots, they averaged 2,500 hours fighter time. And so they were pretty much schooled in what they were doing. And there was no worry about their flying ability, slightly. So we were flying MiGs. This is kind of a MiG example. The first up there, MiG-9, was a prototype. We flew MiG-17s, we flew MiG-21s, and we flew MiG-23s. Slide, please. This is a MiG-17. We didn't see much activity of them in Korea. They didn't make Korea. The MiG-17, it made Vietnam. That was the initial ones we were fighting in Vietnam. Pretty simple airplane. I didn't fly it. The guys that flew it, the seat didn't adjust. You had to take a pillow with you. You know, you double up your pillow, which is the last thing in the world you want. You always want to sit flat against the ejection seat. You know, a pad hurts your back. You know, it gives it time to accelerate before it hits you. But they'd sit on a pillow. We retired them. We started losing them. The engines were bad, and the world threat just wasn't there. The MiG-17s were retired. Slide, please. MiG-17, another slide, please. It's MiG-21. MiG-21 is the one we fought in Vietnam. They produced 11,000 MiG-21s, more fighter aircraft than ever been produced and everything. It was a good airplane. I flew the MiG-21. I got a little over 300 sorties in it. It was a fun airplane to fly. It was fairly simple. There was a couple problems with it that you had flying it. The engines, and we didn't know a lot about these. 90% of the switches we didn't fool with because we didn't know what they did. You only fool with the ones that were important that you saw. But I know in the funnel of it, which is the hardest problem, there was 2 tachometers. Well, not tachometers, but percentages. And if you got them apart, the engine would spool. It took a long time to run it up. If you got it back and you were in a pattern and you shoved it up, it could take 15 seconds before that engine would spool up and give you a thrust. So that was really something you had to worry about, is that you didn't have engine response on it. The other thing on it, if you're in a fight, you get below 200 knots, 250 knots, you had to put the flaps down. You had a switch over here. And it was 2 switches right next to each other. And if you hit the right one, they went down. If you hit the switch next to it, they didn't do anything. And if you were fighting in it, and it would depart on you. It would just do a rolling departure. But as soon as you got to stick for it, it was flying. Yeah. But the MiG-21 was good. A typical mission on it was about a 0.6, 0.7 mission. It was pretty quick, didn't have any gas. It had a radar on it that would just give you the range. But what the people found out is you don't slow down with a MiG-21 because you'll kill you. You know, that's what they found out in firing against it. Next slide, please. Another MiG-21 going up. Slide. By the way, we don't have many pictures because when 9/11 happened in the Pentagon, we had the records in one of my offices, and it burned out. And the safe, it says it'll survive 72 hours. It didn't survive 72 hours. I mean, so every record was burned up on the program. And we got MiG-23s. MiG-23 is a horrible airplane, absolutely horrible airplane. You know, I was out there in 1978 at Nellis, and we all got called in the vault. And Ron Iverson, who went on to be a 3-star general, he was the pilot. He called us in there, and we all signed our life away. And he says, we got a MiG-23, and it's the worst airplane I've ever flown in my life. He said, I ain't worried about killing you, I'm worried about it killing me. You know, and Intel had told us, man, look out for the MiG-23. It's going to come in, speed of heat, it'll go fast. Sweep its wings, and turn right up and just kill you. You know, that wasn't the case. This MiG-22, we had 10 MiG-23s. We had 16 MiG-21s. This is the air-to-ground model. Actually, I think they call it MiG-27 in some things. In the nose, instead of a radar, it had a laser. And that's how it would drop bombs, slide. This is the other MiG-21, or MiG-23. That's, I forget his name, Rick Zettel on it. The guys hated flying it. They didn't want to fly it. They would make them fly it the last 3 months they were there. You know, and they just hated it because it would go out of control on you. It actually had tubes to run the radar. There were tubes, and then we'd have to change. The airplane, it's funny, it had a stick. You know, on the stick it had a knuckle wrapper, which most people never heard of. If you start pulling too much on it, exceeding the AOA you were supposed to be at, you would start slapping your hand saying, quit that. You know, and the guys had to put it forward. Every guy that flew it spun it, you know, and most of them got it out. A couple we lost. But it was a horrible airplane, but it was fast. I mean, it would go till it blows up. It really would. It was redlined to like 750. And guys, when they were trying to get out of the fight, you know, separate from the fight, get out of missile range, they would see that all the time because they were looking over their shoulder. But it truly was a terrible airplane. Engines were terrible. You know, I had 10 of them, and on an average day, we'd go by the hangar, and half of them, to change an engine on a MiG-23, you had to break it in half. You know, normal airplanes, you put their engine in underneath them. And I used to say, man, I don't know how maintenance is going to keep putting these things together the way they are, but they did. You know, so that was a terrible airplane. Okay, slide, please. Another photo of the MiG-23, please. We also had 1438s we kept up there. And the guys, that's the way we maintain our currency, our instrument quals. We could go cross country on them. And we had them painted. The guys had painted them all different camouflages. And had a 2-star come up there, or a 2-star, and he says, well, what's the tech order say on P-38s? You know, we have tech orders on anything. I said, well, they got to be white or blue. You know, and they said, okay. He says, yours on blue. And I said, yeah. He says, as long as they look good, you're okay. You know, so we kept them painted up. But we'd fly them all the time. We'd fly them in red flag. Okay, fine. The program, how we ran the program when guys would come in, we'd have a squadron deploy in. Again, we had a third of the squadron was Navy. And so a third of the program was Navy. So a third of the program we flew against Navy. The other 2/3 were generally Air Force. Now the Air Force guys would deploy into Nellis. The Navy guys wouldn't deploy in. They'd go to Fallon or they'd fly out of Miramar. If the guys come out to Nellis, they have no idea what their deployment was. They'd arrive on Sunday, Monday, we'd have academics with them, you know, and tell them what they were there for, and have them sign their life away for security-wise. And then we'd fly Tuesday through Friday. Sometimes we'd do 2 weeks with them. Our goal was when a unit came in, we only flew with the youngest guys, and guys who never been there before. You know, we don't want to fly with majors and captains or old captains. We'd always fly with the new guys. And we'd fly with them the first mission. We'd go up, meet a MiG-21 in the area, and we'd show them the performance. We'd show them the acceleration. Generally, in MiG-21, we cannot accelerate them. Then we'd show them the turn performance. We could out-turn them. We'd out-turn everybody. And that'd be their first mission. The second mission would be against the flogger, the MiG-23, and they'd show them the speed. You know, I remember we had Smith B-111s come in, and his bomber, you know, we ever flew with, and they come in after beating, and they says, well, if we see a MiG-23, we're just going to run away from them. Oh, yeah, right, you know. So we'd get them out in the area, and 250 knots, say, okay, light your afterburners, and we'd light the afterburner in the flogger, and the flogger would disappear over the horizon. I mean, it was 3 times as fast as they were. Well, we do that, and then about Wednesday we'd start doing one-on-one, combat with them, fight. We'd normally start off offensive with the MiGs, and we'd do that, and maybe by Friday we'd do 2 of them against 2 of us. The pilots, we'd fly up in the morning on Tuesday, and generally fly back every day. We have 2 twins we'd fly and debrief the mission. Sometimes we'd stay up there and debrief. I ended up staying up there just because my crew chiefs were up there and that. But we'd debrief, and by the end of the week, you hope you were beating them. I was a MiG-21 pilot, and I tell them, the worst thing you can do is slow down with me. Well, you got your young captain, he's flying an F-15, he's flying an F-14, and he's all deck and no forehead, and he wants to get in there and kill you with a gun. Well, let me tell you, on day 1, when you gun him in a MiG-21, and he has to come back and tell his friends that you gunned him, that gives them an imprint. That gives them a message more than saying don't slow down with a MiG-21. He showed that you can't do it. But by the end of the week, when they knew how to fight, they did just fine. MiG-23 didn't fight anything. All it did was go through the fight fast. It could maybe get a radar shot, probably not, but it just kind of zoomed back and forth through the fight. And so there was really no threat in MiG-23. It turned out it was just a terrible airplane, and the guys hated flying it. But that was kind of our program. We'd fly them all week. Now, we were no foreign, which meant the foreign nationals couldn't be briefed on it. But we'd fly red flag when it was no foreign, which became unusual. Most of the red flags now have foreign nationals in it. But when there weren't, we'd fly on a mission, which was great for them. They'd start inbound to their targets. They're 50 miles out, and all of a sudden they see airplanes taken out of the airfield right next to their targets. It was really kind of realistic, and we put pods on them, and it worked pretty good. We flew for, we flew 17,000 hours on these airplanes. We flew them over 10 hours or 10 years. What you don't think about in flying airplanes, and maintenance-wise, if you're going to fly this MiG-21 for the next 10 years, well, first off, everybody says, where'd you get them? Well, we got some of them were defectors. Some of them we went in and rebuilt crashes. And the MiG-23s we got out of Egypt. Everybody knows that. In 78, 79, Egypt went from Russia's camp to our camp. We gave them F-4s and we took all their floggers. So that's where we got the MiG-23s. We got them out of there. And later, when I was there, we were buying MiG-21s. They were called F-7s from China. We were getting them brand new. I went over to China and got a C5 load on them. So that's where we got them, which was good. It came in parts. But when you're talking about flying an airplane for extended periods, you got to worry about things. There's a shelf life on everything. The parachutes aren't good for 10 years. Parachutes good for 3 years. So now I need MiG-21 parachutes. Where the hell do I get them? CAD pads, that's explosives you have on the airplane. Blow the canopy off, blow the seat out. They got a shelf life. Where do you go get a CAD pad from MiG-21s? That's kind of the logistics we had. And motors, GE did our motors for us. They reconditioned the motors. MiG-21 and F-7 motors were good. MiG-23s, they were horrible. We kept them going a little bit, but not very well. A funny story, they came into my office one day, the maintenance crew chief master sergeant, he says, we need MiG-21 brakes. So, okay, go get some. Okay, so they take a MiG-21 brake, and they go out and find a company that'll make it for us. Okay, they come back 3 months later and they go, damn, we got really bad news. What's that? We got our MiG-21 brakes. How much it cost? $300,000. Okay. And money was no object in Reagan years. Okay. Well, there's a problem. Since we took a worn-out brake to the manufacturer, and he made it look just like the worn-out brake, so it's worn out. Who would have thought? Who would have thought to tell him, take a normal brake out there? You just didn't think about things like that. So maintenance was a huge thing, but they kept them operating. We made parts there. They'd make them there. We lost an F-7 one day, and we found out that there was a gear that was in the gearbox, and its vibration failure was equal to the vibration of the motor, and that's the reason it fell. You know, to get a complex gear made in the 80s in the States, take a year and a half. We get them made over in Singapore in 6 months. You know, we finally buying them from the Chinese. But just maintenance was a whole thing you never thought about. Now, when I got there, nobody was going to use the ejection seats. You know, the MiG-21s, you were going to be encapsulated with the canopy. And so everybody figured we'll just land it in the desert and see what we get out of it. And we never tested them. And by the way, the airplanes, we didn't change anything in the airplanes. We put an airspeed indicator in it, and we put an oxygen system in it, and a G-suit connection. And that's the only thing we changed to the airplanes. We didn't change anything with them. And so that was kind of iffy. So we flew the airplanes for a long time, and we think it was a pretty good program. You know, we think it improved the capabilities, what we were doing. Now, when we were there, we had a number of accidents. When I was there, we lost 2 airplanes. We lost a MiG-21, engine out. And we tried to, our program was we were going to dead stick them, land them on the runway. The Russians didn't. They just jump out, but we didn't have confidence in seats. We lost one where Kazu's come in and the gear didn't come down. And I was chasing the T-38, and he punched out at the end of the runway. And we lost a flogger in a flat spin. And it was funny. Well, it wasn't funny at the time. But we spun it in, and Hawk Carlisle bailed out of it. He was a young captain, worked for me, and I went out in the helicopter and got him. And he said, man, you know, he says, I ejected. Well, in a flat spin, you got no choice. I mean, you're not going to land it in the desert. And he said, I ejected, but I was in the seat way below the mountains. You know, the ejection seat has a barometer in it, and at a certain altitude it kicks you out. And you get your chute, it prevents you from getting the chute way up high where there's no oxygen, it's cold. He said, I was below the mountains, so you got to change the barometer. Well, you know, which way do you turn it? You know, but when he was coming down a flat spin, he bails out, the plane lands because it's going straight down. And it landed right underneath him and blew up. And he kind of D&D'd it over the side. And he says, when the plane blew up, I thought, man, I'm glad the airlines are hiring. Well, he just retired, a 4-star. He was ACC commander, he was PACAF commander, so it wasn't too bad. He did okay. You know, so the program was good. Give me another slide here. Here's kind of program slides. F-14s with MiG-21s. MiG-21's incredibly small airplane slide. This is my favorite one. If you look at the slide, you know, in the MiGs, none of the switches were labeled. We didn't know what the hell they did. You know, you just do the ones up front that you knew. And when we started getting the F-7s from the Chinese, they were labeled. They were actually pretty nice little airplanes. But you see that switch here, it says, explode bomb. I never wanted to fool with that switch. I didn't know what that switch did. You know? I mean, what's explode bomb mean? Okay, slide. Okay. You know, when we talk about, and this is more of the Intel side, I see Intel treated us well. We had CIA, DIA, and Air Force. Intel did a lot for us. We had guys with badges in the CIA. They had free roam with CIA, and they did good. We had a few problems. When we lost one of the airplanes, well, I'll go back. Through the program, we had 2 pilots killed. Unfortunately, we had one killed in the MiG-17. His name was Hugh Brown. He was a lieutenant in the Navy. And we had a pilot, Mark Posteye, got killed in MiG-23. The MiG-17 spun in, he couldn't get it out of the spin. Mark Posteye crashed MiG-23 short of the runway because he was on fire. He was trying to get back. Both unfortunate. Of course, they told the wives nothing. And so when we declassified the program in 2006, I went out and got Mark's widow and Navy Rob at the 3-star went out and and talked to the widows prior to it happening, and gave them a brief, what really happened. Mark Postai was remarkable. His dad was a P-51 pilot in World War II. He was an F-4 pilot in England. It's a funny story. Every year in the fighter squadron we have a wives' day, where the wives come in and spend the day at the squadron. All the wives were there, and Mark took off in an F-4 and stick throws, and he bailed out, and the plane crashed right in front of all the wives. Then he was in a MiG-21, and the canopy failed, and kind of just roughed him up a little bit. Then he was flying a MiG-17, and the engine quit on takeoff, and he dead-sticked it in the desert. And he woke up, and the plane's on fire, and he climbed over the side, and the seat cooked off, and everything. And then he got killed in the MiG-23. So he had a really kind of rough time. But when I had two accidents when I was there. I lost the MiG-23 and I lost F-7. You have to brief the generals. My two-star Nellis Kemp, he says, we have to tell them what your percentage is. In fighter aviation, they always say, what's your accident rate? And your accident rate is based on number of accidents per 100,000 hours. And 4 is good. Everybody accepts 4 accidents per 100,000. 6, everybody gets pissed off, and you have to go to safety briefings twice a week, and it's not fun. Well, I had to go there and brief, and ours was 100 per 100,000. Which wasn't received well by the generals, but that was okay. They understood. Yes, sir. Ma'am.
How many women pilots did you have?
None. This is before women pilots. Yeah, this was. Matter of fact, one of the pictures has a girl in flight suits at Zara Newton. She was our intel officer. But anyway, intel supported us really well. It was funny when we lost the F-7, and we found out it was a gear was wrong in it. And I went to DIA over here. And we had a guy at DIA that was the MiG-21 expert. And went in and sat down with him and said, hey, you know anything about losing engines through the gearbox failure? He goes, oh, yeah. And this was 80s. He had these card catalogs, thousands of cards with shit written on it. And he pulled one out and goes, oh yeah, the gear's bad. I said, do you ever think about telling us? You want to know? But Intel was pretty good with us. Now, how are we doing, son? We're doing okay. One of the things I did in the Pentagon is I was in charge of foreign material. If you wanted to make a surface-to-air missile system, our office was in charge of going to get it. And people say, well, why do we need the real things? Well, there's a number of reasons. In the 80s and 90s, we decided to build a simulator of an SA something, one of their double-digit SAMs. We spent $100 million. And we developed a simulator and put it on Nellis Range. And it turns out it was useless. A lot of our jamming techniques or whatever we do against systems, we actually attack the circuits. And so if the circuits ain't the same, it didn't work. So we need to have the real things. We, in the 80s, when I was out there, this is when Afghanistan was going with the Russians. The war was going on. They called me up and says, hey, you need to come to Washington and pick some things up. And we had a trailer truck. We sent it down, everything went out and got it. And what they picked up was a flare dispenser and flares from a Frogfoot that was shot down in Afghanistan. Frogfoot was a Russian airplane, and CIA somehow got these flares and flare dispenser. And, I get a call and they say, we're going to haul it back. How do we haul it? I don't know, there's some trucks you have to put the category of your explosives or something on the side of your truck. So what category are we? I don't know. Don't put it on there. But they brought them back. And so we got this flare dispenser and we got these flares, and I gave it to the sergeants, and an hour later they had it mounted on a MiG-21, fully operational. Remarkable people. Okay, back then our main missile, not a main missile, one of our heat-seeking missiles. You have, this was an A9 Papa. What it does is it sees the heat source in your home center line. You launch it, it follows the heat source and hits it. Okay, well, back then, your decoy, when you think somebody's going to shoot you with a heat-seeking missile, you drop flares. Big bright stuff, IR, very intense heat, and that decoys the missile. The missile says, ooh, he skips the airplane, is actually one of these. Okay, so we got an AIM-9 Papa, and if you went up there and chased an F-16 around and it dropped its flares, you shot your Papa, they would ignore the flares and always go for the airplane, because that's the way we developed it. Well, we get Russian flares, guess what? They went for the Russian flare every time. You know, because they were different. You know, it's intensity, it's rise time, separates the aircraft, but they went for the Russian flare every time. And so that's kind of why you need stuff. Funny story, we went over to Russia to get a double-digit sale. We were going to buy from Russians. This is when the wall came down and they're really poor, and they're looking for money. And so we were doing maybe government coverage. You never know who you're dealing with. We went over there and had two guys go there, and they land in Moscow. They leave there and go out to a town. And the town's like 50 miles outside Russia. When they got there, everything is horse-drawn wagons. And there's a factory out there where they're developing the most advanced surface-to-air missiles in the world. And people are riding around on horses. Well, they went out there and they're getting briefed. And the Russians ain't like a missile ride. You know, they're looking at them like, you know, these are the engineers that developed the system. And they kind of said to him, what are you going to do with this system? And our guy said, we're going to protect Washington. And they all took their heads and they finally said, why are you only buying 6 missiles? They said, oh, well, we hear it's a good system. We don't need many more. You know, I guess they kind of knew we were doing it. Now, most of our foreign acquisitions, we do 4 eyes. You know, when we buy stuff and we share it, it's with the Brits, Australians, Canadians, and US. They used to be New Zealand, but they've kind of moved out a little bit when we had that, I don't know, controversy over ships with atomic weapons. I don't know. But that's who we share with. And actually, the dealings we had, the Brits were the best. The Brits could buy a lot of things we couldn't buy. You know, when you buy something overseas, you got to have an end user certificate. And if it said U.S., they wouldn't sell it to you, but if it said England or British, they'd sell it to them. So we did a whole lot with it. But the idea is, you really, in the final thing, need to go against the real thing to do it. And I think I'm getting close to complete. I'd like to take some questions here. If you have any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Hang on a second, because we're filming. Oh, let me give you the mic.
Thank you. So you talked about the amount of MiGs that we got from them. How many of our aircraft did they get from us?
They got some F-5s out of Vietnam, which wasn't much. They probably got some F-14s out of Iran. We have no indication whether they ever tried to have a program like we had. And so that's, you know, all we know. I mean, you don't know what you don't know. Like I say, my experience is you can buy anything. I mean, you pretty much buy anything. And actually, in town here, if we had something we wanted, we could always get the money. Congress had it, or the black world had programs that weren't executing, they could always give you the money. Did they know what we were doing? Sure they did. You know, like I said, when you got a sergeant who tracks 7 hours from the overhead times every day for 10 years, eventually he messes it up and they catch it on the ramp. We had a visiting delegation of Russian generals, came to Nellis back in when I was there, and they were sitting down having dinner with General Kemp, and the general said, how many MiGs you got up at Tonopah? And he said, 150. You know, and I went over to Russia in '93, and I'm not even sure why we were there or what we were doing there, but we had to meet with their staff, and I met with a bunch of 3 stars when everybody's glaring at each other, it was a bad time, they just shelled the White House. So it was pretty tense. And I said, let me tell you who we are and what we're doing here. I didn't know what we were doing there, but the general just said, we know everything about you, Colonel Manclar. I said, okay. That's subject. So they knew we had a program. I honestly believe we were covered for the 117s, which was the best kept secret we ever had. It was really good. Okay.
Other questions?
Did you ever have one land somewhere other than Tonopah and have to explain where it was or something?
We had them land other than Tonopah. And there's only one other place you land on the Air Force range, and they covered it. That was Area 51, obviously. Yeah, we landed. That was the only other airfield on the range.
I had a chance to see Colonel Gail Peck's presentation a few years back, and he mentioned that there were a lot of VIPs, including vice presidents, that would come out to get a backseat T-38 ride. Can you talk about any experiences with folks that came out to see, and why, I guess, the visibility for that particular thing is so sensitive that folks would come out and be participating in that?
Well, one, they control the money. They can go anywhere they want. And we actually, when I was there, we had VIPs probably once every 2 weeks. They were there to see the 117s. That was a huge money. And so they were there. I was kind of a sideshow. We didn't give them rides. Matter of fact, we had a couple 2-seat MiGs when we retired them early, so we didn't give rides to colonels and VIPs. We didn't want to do that. But yeah, there was a constant flow of VIPs out there. But it was the 117s. It wasn't us. We were a cheap sideshow.
Two questions. You mentioned that, when the greener pilots would show up and they'd have to get their orientation, the academic briefs and so forth, and then sign their life away. When they got into the airplanes and they went up, did they know that they were going to be encountering MiGs, or did you guys just show up?
Yeah, when they got there Monday, we didn't brief them on the program. And then Friday, after we were done flying, we'd outbrief them, so supposedly they weren't going to talk about it. Well, of course they talk about it.
Yeah.
17,000 sorties. I think we had about 6,500 pilots went through it. Of course they talked about it. They weren't allowed, but of course they did. I really, in flying a MiG-21, first off, when we'd go up there and they'd come up, they would have shot us with a radar missile or heat missile probably before we ever got together. So, America was there.
Yeah.
If I was flying a MiG-21 and you wanted to try and shoot me with a gun, you better be flying an F-16 or an F-18. Both those airplanes could leave the fight, go vertical, and shoot. But if you were an F-15, F-4, F-14, and you wanted to slow down, you were done. We'd get you. And they'd learn that.
Then the second question that I had was, you're flying Soviet-era equipment and so forth. Did you guys employ Soviet-era tactics?
As the aggressors, we claim we would. In the week, we'd maybe doing 2v2, 2 against them, and running intercepts. And on red flag, we tried to do it. But the basic line is when you get to fight, you just doing whatever it takes, And so I don't know what a Soviet guy would have done. They weren't very good. The rest of the world isn't very good. I was an aggressive pilot in Europe and flew with every Air Force in Europe, flying F-5s out of Alconbury, and Brits were pretty good. French were okay. The rest weren't in the game. Seriously, it wasn't a fight. That's just the way it is.
Going to my encyclopedia called Amazon, I found a couple of books about this topic, and I don't know if you have read either or both of these, and wondering if that would be worthwhile if people just like to.
Well, I'm not selling books. When they asked me to come out here, they said, well, we can't pay you, but you can sell books. I said, well, I don't have a book to sell. The Red Eagle book is written by a British guy, Steve Davies, which I think is pretty good. About 7 years before, different story. 7 years before we declassified the program, I get this phone call from this British guy that says, do you want to talk about 4477? Well, first off, on the Pentagon phone, that'd be a bad deal. But I said, no, absolutely not. And he kept calling me about every 6 months. And then finally I said, hey, I think we're going to declassify it. He wouldn't tell me who, but he met somebody, one of the pilots, and knew it. Declassifying the program, 2006, I think. Bill Davidson was administrative assistant to the secretary. He owned all the security programs. In about 2002, I wrote him a couple letters and said, let's declassify this program. It's bullshit. You guys want to talk about it? And of course, he never answered them. And so I kept badgering him. And we used to have lunch in the mess all the time. And I'd badger him and badger him. And finally, his assistant one day was sitting there, I can't remember his name. He says, okay, goddammit, it's declassified. Okay, that's it? Well, they couldn't give me a piece of paper because you'd have to get state, CIA, DIA signature, how Washington is on the paper. No, it'd take forever. So I called all my buddies and said, hey, it's declassified, and that's kind of how it happened. Now, about a year ago, they said, hey, we found some classified material, but they want a document saying it's declassified. There ain't any. Of course, when I did my first interview, they said, how'd you declassify it? I said, well, our annual review determined it was no longer a threat to national security. It was all crap. He said, okay, it's declassified. It's Washington.
Hey, Jack, today, other than F-16s or F-18s painted up with red stars, can you speculate on any kind of red air activity that might be going on today?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you get these guys that transfer into the squadron, how many hours do they get? What's the training syllabus before you send them out against to train the?
6 hours, 6 flights. Everybody was an air-to-air instructor, and that was it. And then MiG-21, you got 6 flights, and then you went to work. A typical mission, the MiG-21 is you took off, you climbed full afterburner at 20,000 feet, and pulled out of afterburner, and you did it in case the engine would, shit itself, and you could then stick it back in. But you got 20,000 feet, GCI would come up and say, bandits are on your nose 20 miles, you'd like the afterburner, and you were in the fights. And, probably the mission was 0.6, 0.7. And we were fighting overhead the field. We didn't have tanks on. Obviously, the good guys had tanks, and the tanker outside the area. So, about 6 rides. Everybody says, oh, how can you fly an airplane? It's an airplane. Airplanes fly like airplanes. Each one has things you have to learn about. But you give a briefing like this to guys that have old airplanes and stuff, they laugh. They don't have any tech orders. They don't have anything. They're just flying it. Matter of fact, the tech orders we had that were funny, you look at them and you could see the guy's handprints. He was holding it open when he was taking the pictures, the spies. But then they were translated by computer, which meant they made no sense whatsoever. But your sergeants figured it out. That's what they do. The MiG-21 had an air system. We don't have that in our airplanes. You had to blow it up with air. And when you taxi MiG-21, the first time you taxi it, you had to call a tower, and your call sign was zigzag, because the brake was on the stick. And you'd push the left pedal in, and you'd hit the brake, and it would lock that brake, and so you'd jerk it everywhere. What you did is you finally realized taxi fast, so the rudder worked. But if you got out, number 1, getting ready to take off, and your gauge, we didn't know what it was, if it was below kumquats, some number, you had to call them, and they'd come out and give you air, which was an embarrassment to you. You'd better take off with no air than embarrass yourself in front of the guys.
If I got just one other question, I remember Aviation Week and Space Technology published a picture of one of the MiG-21s, maybe on their cover or somewhere in the early 80s?
Yeah.
Was that a big deal for this program?
No. No, I mean, it was just, what are you gonna do? Yeah, I think it was Aviation Week Day or something. No, it was just, it was legal. Like I say, I think the smart people had us as cover for the 117s. The 117s, I mean, think about that. We ran an airline out of Nellis, it was called Key Airlines, we'd fly up there every day, and I had buddies that were flying before I went up there. I was the ops officer of the rest of the squadron there, and the good friends, I didn't know what the hell they were doing up there, you don't ask, you know. But that was the best, the 117 was the best kept secret we ever had until we lost it. And we lost them off range, you know. But that was really a well kept secret, so I think we would just kind of cover, you know, who cares what flying makes? You know, the bottom line is we didn't want to let them know what countries gave them to us. And I'm not sure that matters. You know, we got, a while back, what, we get a whole squadron of MiG-29s from Moldova. That was 97, 98. We got a whole squadron on.
You mentioned the MiG-23 not being much of a, other than speed, and a plane nobody really liked. Would you say that was in some way an error aspect of receiving those? Would there have been another plane at the time that would have been better for a fighter or tactical aspect of getting more intel on?
No, that's where they were then. That was their high-tech fighter at the time, 79. Now they've gone to MiG-29s and Su-27. They got all kind of things. The Su-27 is a really good airplane. It's a little bit bigger than the F-15, which F-15 is huge. Flight controls, they figured out all the flight control laws. It flies really, really good. And I will say that when we were fighting for the F-22, Johnny Jumper was, I think he was running ACC, he went up and said, our pilots flying their airplanes are beating us 50-0. And that was in the Su-27. Again, they were cam setups. You know, and the bottom line is they had a helmet mounted sight. If you got a helmet mounted sight, you look at people, your missile looks at them and you shoot them. We didn't have helmet mounted sights at that time. And so their airplanes are pretty good. Now, I think they haven't caught up. The F-22 and stealth, they don't do stealth. So we're still ahead of them, but their planes are pretty good. Yeah. As a matter of fact, I would say there's pilots that flew the Su-27 and flew the F-15, and they say they like flying the Su-27 better. You know, it's a lot more comfortable to fly, I guess. Yes, sir.
What were the take-home points that the trainees got out of the program, and how did that correlate with what you were trying to get across? What did your after-action reports say?
The take-home points were, first off, you've flown against MiGs, so the first one you see ain't going to be the first one. You've already seen them, so there's no buck fever. There's no problem. The bottom line is you're flying against the flogger, come in low. You look down, radar doesn't work. He can't look down at you. And by the way, if you pass him canopy to canopy, you can see him again. I mean, his turn radius is way too big. MiG-21s was, in the bottom line here, they were fighting. Everybody wants to shoot each other with a gun. You want to get it on your film. It looks great. You can say tracking, kill for the F-15 heading 360. But the bottom line is you don't want to slow down. You know, you don't want to slow down with these guys unless you're good. You know, unless you're good. You know, we used to fight the F-16's weapons school. It was part of their program. They'd have so many sorties against us. They'd come up in a two-ship. One would be the instructor, one would be the student, and you'd split up. They'd go one with the MiG-21, another go with the MiG-21. Well, I used to hate it when I got the instructor. You know, because the bottom line is you start off, okay, here we go, and I knew what there's going to be every time. He'd go into a hard break. I'd stay in a hard break with him. I'd lose 150 knots. he'd roll his wings level and do a loop and gun me. Well, when I saw him do that, if it wasn't training, I'd leave. You know, I'd pull to his six and leave. But I mean, he'd do it every time. And they just learned it. That's what you do. Use the vertical because you can do it. You know. And so I think it was a confidence builder for the guys. I think they realized the flogger wasn't going to hurt anybody. You know, but we forced them into a visual fight. In the real world, they're in a world of hurt. You know, depending on the rule of engagement, when I can shoot him, I know who he is way early in the fight. You know, I mean, I know who he is. He can't, in the stealth fighters, you know, the F-22, they never see him. We fought the F-22, I was in charge of the test of the F-22. We flew hundreds and hundreds of sorties, F-22s against F-15s. 8 F-15s against 4 F-22s. They got one shot in 8 months out of the F-15. It's because the stupid F-22 was up conning. And they saw his con and shot him with a heat missile. I mean, it's no contest. I mean, it's just... we haven't lost a fighter in air-to-air since 1972. We haven't lost any since 72. F-15, its kill ratio is 104 to 0. The F-15 shot down 104 airplanes. Now, some of them were Israelis. Matter of fact, a lot of them were Israelis. But think about that. It shot down 104 airplanes and never lost one. It ain't much of a fight for them. You wouldn't want to be on their side.
Other folks? Let's thank Jack.